This past month, I've made some solid strides in the development of my monster collecting roguelike game, Infernomon. It's been a busy few weeks and I'm excited to show you what I've accomplished so far. My focus was mostly split between a few major areas. First up, I integrated an experience system that rewards players when they defeat enemies. Along with that, I built out a new level up and evolution mechanic that gives your creatures a real sense of growth. Next, I designed a new stats board that you can pull up during dungeon runs. This lets you track your team's performance in real time, helping you plan and strategize more effectively. And third, I dug into building out the different role slots for your team, which are assassin, tank, and support. Each role now has unique abilities to bring new tactics to the gameplay and making each team member's role feel more impactful. And on top of that, I've also been fine-tuning some of the gameplay mechanics in my game to try to make things feel more smooth and cohesive. And it's actually now starting to feel like a real game, which has reinvigorated me and got me even more excited to show you what I've been working on. So with that being said, let's dive into the details of the updates, and we'll first start off by showing you the new level up and experience system that I built. So before jumping in and explaining how the experience and level up system works, I first want to briefly talk about the wave system that I made in my game. So if you played some Survivor games, this might look pretty familiar, but I had this next wave button here up at the top. So when I click this, a wave of enemies will spawn. They spawn on the outsides of the map and will slowly move towards your team. So they'll come into view any second now. There they are. So yeah, they'll come towards you. Your team will start attacking them. And so this is one of the subwaves within the first wave that gets sent. And so shortly after this wave spawns, you can see that new wave subwave spawned and it is now coming to battle me. So the way that experience works in my game is that there's a certain amount of experience that gets yielded for each entire wave. So let's say this first wave, for example, maybe it yields 500 experience points. And maybe there's 5 subwaves within this entire wave. So that means all that 500 experience is going to be divided across each of the 5 individual subwaves. So that means each wave would get 100 experience points each. And then that 100 experience points is divided across each of the enemy Infernomon within that subwave. So if that subwave has 5 enemies, that means each individual enemy is going to be yielding something like 20 experience points each. So then when you defeat one of the enemy Infernomon, that 20 experience point is going to be divided across the allies on your team. And the way that works is the ally on your team that gets the final blow is going to get 50% of the experience from the enemy. And then the other 2 characters on your team are going to get 25% of the experience points each. So this typically means the character on your team that does the most damage is probably going to end up getting the most experience points. I'm thinking I'll probably need to balance this somewhat, so maybe there will be items in the game that your characters can pick up that grant experience points to kind of keep it so all the allies on your team are roughly the same level. So as you get experience, you can see these experience bars will slowly start to go up, and then when they fill all the way up, your character will level up. I did build a test menu in the game to make this the testing quicker, so if I expand this little ugly test menu here at the top left and click level up, the characters level up on your team and that little animation plays. So if I click that again, you can see that there's a little animation, a little sound that I added for the level up. So if you watched my last video, you know that I've been using Cursor AI to help me write some of the code in my game. And I also use Cursor AI to help build the evolution animation. And I'm using a particle system in GameMaker. And all I did in Cursor was I went in there and said that I wanted, a little ring animation that plays underneath the character. I want these floating squares that go vertically up. And then I also want a little firework effect where you can see those little pixels shooting out. When I told Cursor what I wanted, it got it pretty close the first time for each of those animations. I just had to fine tune the speed and the size of the particles and things like that. But all in all, I think it did a pretty good job. And I think it's a decent animation for now. So I also got evolutions working in my game. So when your character reaches the level requirement for evolution, which will be level 7 for Chiropter. So I'll click this, little animation plays. He flashes back and forth between his old evolution and the new evolution. And there's this little ball animation that plays. And then after that, he evolves. Then I can show you the one for Drupashroom right here real quick. If I just level him up to level 9, you can see that he's starting to evolve now. And so while I was doing this, I wanted to make sure that the stats for the characters were being updated when they evolved. So on each of the character menus, I added the stats at the top of the menu. So you can see that when they grow up a level, their stats are going to go up, and then when they evolve, there's also a stat increase with that as well. So if I level this guy up again, you can see his stats went from like 46 attack to 51 attack or something like that. So yeah, adding the stats menu and seeing the level up and experience system all come together, it really makes it feel like your characters are progressing and growing through your dungeon run. So that felt really nice to get that part done. So the next thing I started working on was this stats board here. There's a button at the bottom right of the screen that you can click that shows the character's stats through each of the dungeon runs. And I'll just push play here so you can see the stats kind of go up as I talk. But this stats board really helped me out for the next thing I'm going to show you, which is building out the character roles. I needed to have some testing to make sure like the damage that the characters are doing are in line with their stats, and to make sure that the damage that they're receiving is in line, and the healing that they're doing, and so forth. So on the stats board, of course, there's a row for each of the different characters on your team. There's this first column here is for how many eliminations they have. The second column is their assist. Third column is their death count, which I don't have deaths working right now, so this is just all 0. This column here is for how much damage they've done. This column here is how much damage they've received. And then this last column here is how much healing that they've done. So once again, I used Cursor AI to help me step out this menu. I told it which columns I wanted and which variables on the character objects I wanted to reference. So each of those different stats is actually being tracked on the object in GameMaker. So this is the ally Infernomon object that I pulled up, and the player object is going to be somewhat similar to this. But these are all the different variables that I'm tracking for the dungeon stats. So these just get updated whenever your character deals damage or gets a kill or whatever. And so then if I jump over to my deal damage function, there's a bunch of different logic here for handling the updating of your stats when you level up, handling the eliminations, assists, and experience updates when you defeat enemies and things like that. And so after building this stats board, I kind of thought it was mesmerizing to just send a bunch of different waves of enemies and just watch the stats go up over time. And many of the games that I've played, I've always liked pulling up the stats boards throughout the game. Like, for example, in Heroes of the Storm, or it'd be something similar in like League of Legends, where you want to be seeing your character's damage go up over time and trying to be the top damage dealer on your team or whatever. So yeah, you can see also on my table, I had these highlighted columns for the highest value for each of the different categories. So if it's highlighting green, that means Druva here has gotten the most eliminations on the team. Copter's dealt the most damage. The player character has dealt the most assists, and so forth. So the last few days this month was spent building out the role slot benefits. And so to help explain that, I'm going to open up the team builder here. You may have seen this quite a few times in some of my other videos, but this is where you organize your team, of course. Each slot on your team has a specific benefit to it. So Torch here in the assassin slot, this assassin slot here, when he's equipped in here, he's dealing 50% more damage. Druva, a support character in the support slot here, is going to be healing 150% of the damage he deals as heals to his allies. And then the tank slot is going to provide a threat increase, which forces enemies to attack him, and also gets a defense increase. And then one of the things about this view here that I'll briefly touch on is that if I swap these two characters, so I have an assassin in a support slot, and a support in an assassin slot, this is going to make it so that the effects of the Infernomon in that slot are cut in half. So that goes along with every slot. So Torch isn't going to be as effective of a healer in the support slot. One of the unique things about the utility characters, though, so if I pull in Polywall here, he's a utility character, so he can be placed in any of the role slots and still receive the benefit of being in that role slot. And one thing that's not showing up here, but the player character is going to be acting the exact same way. Player character can be put in any slot and receive the slot bonus. So yeah, I had all those bonuses showing up in the menu before, but they weren't actually working in game. So I can send another wave and talk through this a little bit more again. So Chiropter is in the assassin slot, and he's an assassin, so he should be doing the most damage. But the only thing is with this dungeon here, these are earth-themed Infernomon and some water-themed Infernomon. So Chiropter, even though he's an assassin, he's not dealing as much damage to those enemies. And then the same thing goes to Druva, since they're a Blight Infernomon, and Blight is super effective against earth. They're going to be dealing quite a bit of damage. So even though they're in the slots that where you'd think the assassin would be dealing more damage just because the types of the Infernomon in the dungeon, in this case, Druva is going to be doing a little bit more damage than Chiropter. So this is where the stats menu came in handy to make sure, the assassin characters were dealing more damage than the support and the tank, and that the tank was taking the bulk of the damage. One thing I didn't do here was I can actually change the tank to attack whatever's the strongest enemy in range. And so when I do that, you should see that the tank starts gaining more threat, making the enemies focus their attacks on him, and obviously he's going to be taking the most damage in that case. So there's different things I had to do to test to make sure these slots were working, and one of the ways I did that was I equipped two of the exact same Infernomon in different role slots. You won't be able to do this in the real game. In the real game, it's going to make it so you can only have one of each character on your team at once, so you can't have two Torches. But I need to do this for testing purposes, so if I start another dungeon run and let this play out for a minute, you'll slowly be able to start to see that this Chiropter here, since they're the assassin, they're going to be dealing more damage. Oh, you can see a little bug there. This for some random reason, the sprites sometimes get stretched. So that's a bug I'll need to fix. But yeah, gradually over time, you're going to see that this chiropter is going to be dealing slightly more damage than the chiropter in the support slot. And then you're also going to be seeing this chiropter get more eliminations. And then you'll see this character, since they're kind of in the tank slot and not dealing a ton of damage, it makes sense that they're getting a lot more assists. So one of the things I added to my game to be able to track more of the stats to make sure my roll slots are working is I added a toggle to the code that I can turn on and off that turns on and off these last few columns. So these are helping me check, for example, this column here is for threat tracking. So this means that my tank is generating the most threat and typically forcing enemies to attack him. And then you can also see this column here is how much damage they're taking per attack. So you can see he's taking slightly less damage per attack than the support. So he's likely getting that defense bonus that you get from being in the tank slot. And then lastly, you can see that this assassin, or this chiropter, that's the assassin, is dealing slightly more damage than the chiropter that isn't in the assassin slot. I'm also able to track to make sure, you know, that the healing percentages are right. So since chiropter is an assassin in the support slot, they're getting a 75% heal on each of the damaging attacks that they do. It's not exactly 75%, since you can see this is actually maybe closer to like 80%, since 80% of like 180 should be lower than 170, but there's some rounding going on when I'm doing the healing effect. And so that kind of bumped this number up since I'm rounding up when doing healing, but it's roughly what I'd expect to be seeing. So it appears that the defense buff from the tank slot, the healing buff from the support slot, and the damage buff from the assassin slot are all working. So you can also see with the support, if I send more waves, obviously I have death turned off. So these guys' health bars are going to drop all the way to 0. So every time the support deals damage, he'll heal the weakest ally on the team, which in this case is the player. So you can kind of see their life ticking up every single time the support chiropter deals damage. So after building all these mechanics and adding them to the game, I then did a little bit of balancing to make things feel a little bit better. For example, I increased the amount of health that the allies on your team have. This number was increased by like 5 times higher than it was before. I slowed down the leveling speed. Before, I was expecting characters to be able to level up all the way to level 100 outside of the dungeons, but in each of your dungeon runs, it felt like if you were leveling up all the way to level 100 each dungeon run, that would feel like way too many level ups. So I wanted to maybe max out at like level 30-ish per dungeon run. So I made the leveling speed about 3 times slower. I lowered the evolution levels. Before chiropter would evolve at like level 18. Now he evolves at level 7. I also made secondary attacks weaker. So if you don't know, your character has a primary attack, so in this case, chiropter shoots a firebolt for his primary attack and a wind bolt for his secondary attack. And so I just made it so that that wind attack there is a slightly weaker attack than the fire attack. But in my game, there's going to be power-ups eventually when you level up, like other roguelikes, of course. And so there will be opportunities to change the typing on your secondary attack and also to make it stronger and things like that. And one thing I also added was this roaming toggle. Before, this was going to be a super effect toggle. If you saw my last video where it would force your character to find whatever it's most super effective against and attack that target. But I'm removing that for now. I may bring it back. We'll see. So if I turn roaming on, and then I move him clear out of attack range of everything. Once they come within his attack range, he'll move towards them and start attacking them. So once they get kind of close, he'll move in and start attacking. But if that toggle's turned off, then it's more manual and he won't move anywhere unless you tell him to move there. So after I tweaked all those few things, my game really started to kind of feel like it was a real game. Everything started to feel like it was coming together. Right now, this is kind of pretty chaotic. I just sent like a bunch of waves at once just because I wanted to show you the stats board and show you the healing and things like that. But obviously, it's not going to be this chaotic once you're actually playing the game. I'll probably try to get it so that your team's not fighting more than like maybe 10 enemies total at once. Anyways, that's all I have for this month. Going forward, I'm going to start working on building out the power-ups. So when your character levels up, there'll be a power-up that they can choose from. So that will be things like when you shoot a projectile and it lands, it explodes and does damage in an area, or maybe your a melee character will deal cleave damage. Maybe you'll get something that reduces the revive time your character needs to wait when one of them dies, and other random power-ups like that. And then also, I'm going to be working on updating the assets in my dungeon to try to make this look a little bit more cleaner. I'm thinking I'll probably actually do that first before doing the power-ups. So next video, you can expect to see more map updates probably. And then maybe by that time, I'll also have started working on the power-up system. But anyways, thanks to all of you who watched till the end. If you're still here, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. It really helps me. Give feedback. Let me know what you think about my game so far. Yeah, and I'll see you in the next video.